The tech bros are trying to take away your humanity, but you're not a machine. Let's talk about what it means to live like a human in this high-tech world. This is Analogish, and I'm your host, Becky Mollenkamp. Today, I am joined by Maz George, they, them, a compassionate galvanizing coach, astrologer, artist, and teacher with a background in art, design, and communication, aka iteration, future building, and wayfinding. As a queer neurodivergent astro coach, Maz is dedicated to supporting multidimensional misfits, transmute shame into pride, stress into joy, and fear into freedom. Maz is also the founder of Cosmic Playground, a prismatic play space for creatives, avid zine maker, and a future transcestor. Oh, I can't wait to hear more about all of it. I'm excited. But I want to start with zines because that was what made me reach out to you. Because one of the things that I have been thinking about in my own business was creating some sort of printed newsletter, newspaper, something. My background's journalism. I'm old enough that I worked on printed newspapers, printed magazines, and those things have kind of gone by the wayside. But I also remember zines, and often used in like poetry groups and literary kind of circles where people would create their own, sometimes just hand-drawn, sometimes with a typewriter, which I know you use a typewriter, or on the computer, printed off, manually kind of assembled and either sold or given away to people to share their work that wouldn't be featured in traditional published spaces. I'm actually going to include in the show notes an awesome article I found from Book Riot about the history of zines for anyone who wants to do that deep dive that I did. But I'm kind of curious what your background is with zines and then how maybe they're different now than they were back in like the 90s, early 2000s kind of pre-internet boom.
I've loved zines since I was a teenager, so for 20 years. Started making zines in my early 20s, and then it was like, we weren't doing them online. Like you're saying, we're cutting and pasting, they were hand-drawn, there's a lot of typewriter happening, there was like rubber stamps, like it was basically anything that I can photocopy that's going to photocopy really well. Anything that's cheap and easy to reproduce, so anything that's going to like catch on the Xerox machine really well. These days, it's incredible. You can do anything. I mean, the fact that I can open up Canva and make a zine in less than an hour is like incredible. So I would say the typesetting these days is a lot better, a lot easier to read. I think when you're using stamps or handwritten or anything like that, things kind of tend to fall out as they get photocopied hundreds and hundreds of times. So these days, they're much more clear. There's a lot of creativity. I think the way that we're thinking of zines is really different because we're thinking of them almost as an alternative to the internet. Like it used to be that, as you said, when you're sharing something in a zine, that would be your like best way to publish and share and spread the news. Now you have so many platforms. You could share on social media, you could share on Substack, you could share on all kinds of places. And so choosing to make a zine is such a different format. And so I think it's coming with a lot more intentionality and creativity versus like a need of like, I have to get this out and this is my best way to get it out. Now, I still think zines are really popular because they're uncensored, which is fabulous. They don't depend on an algorithm. There's whole networks, at least I'm in the United States, so there's whole networks in the United States of like zine distros and zine festivals and all these amazing ways to share and spread your zines. I'm definitely seeing a really cool resurgence, and I think that's because they are like so uncensored and so tangible and physical. But what's really cool is that you're seeing, it's like, it sort of moved from this place of like, I don't want to use the word desperation, but like, okay, this is my main channel. When I was 20 and I was making zines, I was like, this is the main way for me to get something out. There's no Instagram, there's no Substack. Maybe I could live journal or put it on my MySpace, but if I want a lot of people to see it, I'm going to like make it and sell it and share it. But these days, what's so cool is that you can do it in so many ways. And then what's really funny is I see people promoting their zines on social media or promoting them on Substack. And so there's almost like using our internet channels to share your printed media is really cool and really different. That obviously wasn't happening 20 years ago.
This podcast is called Analog-ish. The ish is doing a lot of heavy lifting there because I am in no way trying to do digital minimalism. I'm not trying to escape completely. I'm still on platforms. I'm still using digital spaces. You're talking about using Canva to create zines. So I think in my mind anyway, we can say I'm living a completely analog life and then sort of watch life go by us because it's very hard to exist today completely digital free. Like that's not how the world looks anymore. And as much as we may hate AI, we may hate certain things about what social media has done to us and algorithms and all that, we also have to like there's some degree of I have to accept the reality in which I live, and how do I balance these things? How do I accept that without saying I have to let it take over my life? And how do I still express my creativity, get my hands involved, have a tactile experience of living, like touch this world around me? Because in my day, again, zines were this, it was a completely tactile, very different world. But now here they are again, and it feels like it's showing up in this way of saying exactly that of we can honor that the world is digital, and we can still say we want to have some tactile experience of life. So I'm curious, what is it that you and the people that you are in this world with, what are you getting out of the experience of creating and also of reading other people's zines?
Think it's so much more focused. I think it's, like, kind of the way like, it reminds me of how the way I used to read blogs when I was 16 years old, like, there wasn't Substack where you get, like, hundreds of blogs at once. It was like, "Oh, no, these are my 3 favorite blogs on music." And every Saturday when they post, I go and spend, like, an hour on each, and I just, like, absorb it. So what I love about zines is they're so focused. You can really spend time holding them and being engaged with them. And as a maker, it gives me something to focus on. Like, I might just throw up an Instagram post or something about something I'm thinking about, but to make a zine, I'm like putting in time and energy. There's maybe a little research, there's some writing or some creation. I'm spending time with my typewriter, which we all know is like takes a lot longer than typing something up on your computer. At least it does for me. Also, we're embracing typos there. There's like this almost like imperfection in the production that is really exciting for me. And mistakes happen and they can be really fun and beautiful. The other thing I love about them is like I sort of tell people there's a zine algorithm, if you will, of instead of like the algorithm of past things I've liked that I come in contact with. Like I have kind of my places. I live in Brooklyn and I have sort of my places I go to look at zines. And there's all kinds of zines there. So you're always going to find something new. And there's like this beautiful network around zines. And there's this like discovery thing that can happen. One of my favorite stories about this is that I went to Quinby's, a great spot here. I found this zine on color alchemy, gorgeous, full color, $15. It felt like an absolute treasure. So excited. Then, like 6 months later, I was at a zine festival, part of the New York art book fair that Printed Matter does every year. And they have a zine tent. And I saw on someone's table that zine, and I got so excited, like, oh my God, that's my favorite zine. And I couldn't even help myself. And this man, maybe like 65, 70, was standing at the table, and he's like, how do you know my zine? I've never met you. And I was like, oh my God, I bought this zine 6 months ago at Quimby's. It's my favorite zine ever. And he was like, you bought it at Quimby's? Like, that's so cool. Like, that's amazing. I love that I made something that's your favorite zine. And then I gave him one of my zines that was influenced by his zine. And it was just like this really beautiful moment. And then I took his class on color theory and color alchemy, and it created this like amazing moment of connection, but all through this like hub of Quinby's, which is the zine space. So it's cool for me to think about people. I know I've sold zines in Australia, in the UK, in Germany. It's cool for me to think of someone like waiting for a bus in Berlin reading one of my zines. It feels really magical. And I know that like social media can have that reach, but because it's so numbers focused and we don't focus on the tactile or the actual person on the other end, it feels so different. You know, if I make a reel and I get 100 likes, I'm like, oh, just 100 likes. But if 100 people read my zine, I'm like, oh my God. It has such a different feeling because I'm thinking of those 100 people experiencing the physical experience of the zine. And it feels really magical. There's a really different like way that we view success in zine making, and at least in my experience, which is really exciting. And I think it's so human.
That was the word that I heard too, and that is like it feels so human. It's hard to put words to the difference between having 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people open your electronic newsletter that you never see them. You don't know what they're, especially when you don't get feedback. I think when we have more engagement online, it's great. That feels like even that has gotten physical experience of sitting with it, right? Spending time with it, maybe reading it again and again, sharing it, physically sharing it with someone, having a conversation about it. It is just so much more human. And there was something you said in your input thing that I had you fill out that really hit me and that feels like it speaks to this a bit, which it says, I've noticed for myself that I often reach for my phone when what I really need is another resource, sleep, a meal, tea, a visit with a friend. And the things that you said that what you're really needing all feel sort of like that tactile, human sort of experience. And so I guess Zines feels like it's doing something like that for you because you said you love technology. You're not anti-technology, but it's sort of that balance. How does the zine piece fit into your idea of kind of creating some of this balance for yourself?
I think tech for me is so much about consumerism, and zines, even if I'm consuming a zine, it's so creative. And so I'm really engaging with someone's creative effort in a way that inspires my creative effort. And I think there's this like myth that I have of if I scroll Instagram or back in Tumblr days or whatever, I'm getting inspired and I'm going to go use that inspiration to make something. The chances of me doing that are very, very limited. Being honest with yourself about that is so important. I know a lot of people go like the artist way is canon at this point, and in the artist way, Julia Cameron talks about taking a break, a media break, and she wrote it in the 90s, so she wasn't even thinking about social media. But one of the points she makes that is so important for me to remember is like, we think that consuming is going to inspire us to create, but consuming is one mode and creation is another mode, and they're different. And I think there's something that whether I'm making a zine, I'm obviously in creation mode, but if I'm reading someone else's zine, it's like their level of intention and creation is so palpable that it actually does inspire me to then go and make something, which is amazing. I aim to make a zine a month these days, which is really supportive for me. It's just like a good creative goal. And then also I run an online community and we make a zine together every month as a way of integrating. Now, not everyone in the community is a zine maker, but it's fun to like do something and then integrate it through creation instead of integrating it through consumption. Because I think that like when we're in these platforms that are designed for consumption, we can work so hard and fight the current and we can create on them there, but it can be challenging. But in a space like zine making, it's tangible. It's meant to be very human, to bring people together, to engage with our imperfections, our humanity. And my other favorite things about zines is it really encourages delight and discovery, which is two of my favorite things in all my work is like I want people to be delighted. I want them to discover something. I want them to feel like surprised and like, oh my gosh, like this is so generative and so exciting. And that's a little bit hard to do online. It can be done, but it's hard to do. And we know that keeping someone's attention online is, like you said, you might get 1,000 opens, but who even read the email? We don't know. Whereas with a zine or something tactile, like there is this like, because it's part of our physical world, I think there's an inclination to spend more time with it, which is very exciting. The phone becoming the crutch of like every need, every resource is something I'm trying to step away from. And so having like tarot cards or an art practice or even a meditation practice or taking walks or whatever it is to keep me grounded in the physical world and be like, oh, the physical world has like a lot to offer me too. This is really important. Is so good for me to have more balance.
I'm just curious for people who don't know, who maybe are younger and don't remember, or who only remember them being a certain way. And it sounds like you're quite the consumer of them. If somebody was to think they're feeling inspired and thinking, yeah, I want to get back to something, a physical practice, and this sounds really cool, but what do I make? Maybe you can inspire us by telling a little bit about what you're creating and what other people are using them for.
Some of my favorite zines are, they kind of go in, there's a lot of, like, as you said, there's a lot of uses for zines. There's chapbooks, there's literary zines, there's political zines. I do a lot more like art zines. My zines are really visual, which I love. I'm more of a collage artist, more of a visual artist. So my zines are very visual. A zine that we made in our community in January, which was so fun, was I had everybody make ally zines. So pulling together things that instead of like a mood board or a vision board for the year, we made a zine of like, what if this year, what resources can we use and turn to? What words are supportive? What images? What practices? So we made these beautiful zines that had everything kind of collected, and they function as like little paper talismans in our pocket that we can pull out and look at any time. And I think we made them about 6 weeks ago, and I've definitely looked at mine hundreds of times because it's just so helpful to have this like little thing with me. I see people doing a lot of zine making around technology, things like how do I use technology? How do I get off my phone? How do I stop working? Resource sharing that would be censored online is like another category that I use a lot of, things about abortion care or gender affirming care in states where that's really challenging to come by. So things like that are really incredibly helpful and popular right now, I would say. And it's cool because, like I said, it's a very focused resource. So yes, I could Google that, or I could look that up, or I could work on finding that, or I could find a zine. And the thing about the zines is like, they're so community based that I know that if someone is putting it into a zine, they've either tried those things or they know for a fact that those have worked in their area, et cetera, et cetera. So those are ways that people are using zines now. And a great place, something I always tell people to start with is like, look at your notes app. What are you taking notes on in your phone? What are you thinking about? What words inspire you? Also, what's really easy for you? Are you a writer? Make a zine with writing. Are you political? Make a a zine about activism? Are you, I mean, we should all be doing that, but we should all be political these days, but are you a collage artist? Make a collage artist zine. Don't try to go out of your you can stay in your lane. It's always fun to expand, especially when you get inspired. But if you're just starting and you want a place to start, my favorite thing to teach people is the one sheet mini zine format. It just is one piece of computer paper folded a few different ways. You can make it double-sided. I also recommend people print at their library if you're printing zines. Like copiers and scanners and printers are really, really cost-effective, amazing. And we need to use more library resources so they stick around. But yeah, I always tell people, like, start with what you are excited about. I've been blessed to witness a lot of people making their first zines. I also offer zine mentorship hours, so I help people make zines that they're really excited about. And what's really cool is when you see that thing printed and you're like, oh my gosh, that alone is inspiring and exciting. So I try to get people to shorten the length between making it and getting it in their hands so that they can keep that excitement going. So that's like my number one tip. A new zine maker or an old zine maker, get it printed as soon as possible so you can hold it and see it.
I was thinking a little bit about the limitations that could come up with
Really.
zine making for the first time. One is it doesn't seem like a process that lends itself to things that are super timely, which I think is what online has taught us, that capitalist urgency. And so it feels like everything needs to be like, it has to be super pressing and has to be something timely. And what if I make a zine and that information's outdated? And it sounds like what you're saying is stick to things that are more timeless. That doesn't make it less valuable. And I think sometimes we think it does because of the conditioning we've gotten. But then the other limitations I was thinking around are just like expenses, the costs of printing, the costs of postage, which is astronomical. Trying to ship things international, which is wildly astronomical. So, distribution parts of this, is it something that is done? You're quite lucky in that you are in a large urban area. You probably have access to a lot more in your neighborhood than most of us would when it comes to zine sharing and distribution. But what does that look like for somebody who's new to that? How do I find zines? If I decide to make one, how do I get it out into the world in a way that doesn't break me financially?
This is why I think the one sheet is so cost effective, because it's like one sheet, black and white, very cost effective. Printing at the library, we love it. I mean, yes, I am very blessed in my location and my access. This summer, I did print 600 zines and give them out for free. And the way I did that was I made them half sheets. So each piece of paper printed two of them. So each zine cost me 10 cents to make. I distributed a lot by hand. And then to cut down on cost, I packaged like 50 at a time and mailed them to friends in other cities to distribute by hand. So that really cut down on the cost. So also thinking about, yeah, like absolutely when you're making it, I know everybody wants to make like a full color, full bleed, like gorgeous zine, and we love that. That might be better as a digital zine if you're trying to do it that way. You can also always do print on demand, so you can share PDF links for people to print them themselves. I'm always reminding people of the library because the library is an amazing. At my library, you can scan for free, fantastic, and then printing a sheet of black and white is 10 cents. So if you're doing two zines per sheet, double-sided, each zine is 10 cents, which is fabulous. Cost of shipping is astronomical. Also, trying to find places that had like zine distributors. So there's places in Portland and Phoenix and New York, in Chicago and San Francisco. There's all these little places, all these little zine distros. And there's also zine festivals that are fantastic. And then online zine shops. There's this great zine shop called Zine-O-Matic. I believe for $15 a month, they'll send you a few zines every month. And then there's a friend of mine, Carissa Lucille, runs an incredible zine distro in Phoenix, Arizona. And they also have an online shop. It's called Wasted Ink Zine Distro, WISD for short. And so they have an online shop. So you can always just like peruse, which is fabulous. And then checking out things like zine libraries. I mean, I have a whole list of resources in my community for folks because yeah, there's so many places to like look at and learn about zines. The Brooklyn Museum here did a zine exhibit 2 years ago. And so their online resources are fabulous. They even have a little PDF of how to make your first zine. So lots of cool resources online. And I always recommend people definitely focus on cost-effective black and white one sheet to begin with.
It's funny you say that because there's a site called newspaperclub.com, which I will also link to, because they sent me an email and I was reading through. I was like, oh, again, my background's journalism. I love a print newspaper. I think a lot of business owners are also thinking about that physical connection with our communities again, because everything is so saturated online that you don't really feel like you're creating a connection. And now returning to some of these old school methods feel innovative again in that people aren't used to it, so it stands out. It was really expensive, but it was also, like you said, beautiful, perfect. And perfectionism can be the enemy of good enough and actually getting something finished. So I appreciate that advice. And again, it's that capitalist conditioning that we have about everything needing to be urgent and more and amazing and perfect and white supremacy culture. So good reminder. Okay, I want to talk about some other things you do in our last few minutes here. You said you have a typewriter, which I'm guessing also maybe feeds into the zine making. You also have a sketchbook all the time and you're sketching, which also probably feeds into the zine making. And then you're reading physical books, which I'm listening to books, but that still counts as reading. And I'm doing a lot more of that. And then tarot cards, sending snail mail. How do all these activities play with each other? And then also, how are you looking at finding that analog-ish life?
Part of being on this planet is the joys of sensual experiences. Anything that delights all my senses. And so all the things you named are all sensual experiences that keep me grounded and tethered to this planet in a way that feels really lovely. And it's funny because I've been selling zines for a long time, and I have these 2 zines that I made in 2018, I believe. And I made each of them within 3 hours. One is for the full moon, one is for the new moon. And people still, like, to this day, when I sell at Zine Fest, it's their favorite zine. Everyone's like, those are the ones they gravitate to. So about a year ago, I was wondering, like, what is so special about these zines? And then I realized at the time I had daily sketchbook practice. And so those zines were kind of born out of this daily sketchbook practice. And it's so cool to think about how that works. And for me, it's like anything that we're doing that is slow, that is imperfect, that is human, that is like very anti-capitalist, that is very anti the use of technology these days, which is to make things like perfect and fast and immediate. They all remind me that like all parts of me get to exist. And so I think part of getting to make a zine, or part of having a sketchbook practice or taking a walk, is intentionally being like, yes, I am not a machine. I get to live life and experience life in the ways that I want. I'm going to reclaim my agency around this thing, around my time, around my creativity. I see so many people who are they say, I used to be so creative, but I'm not anymore. And it's like, well, you're probably not anymore because of the absolute nightmare that is late stage capitalism, and the ways that we're forced to produce all the time, and the ways that we're forced to make these very challenging decisions often between resources, and the ways that we use our resources, time and energy being 2 of our most like important limited resources. But putting them into creative efforts, I think, is so important, and such a good reminder of, yeah, we get to be here to make things and to connect with people, and not everything has to be a $1 million idea, and not everything has to be so consequential. Actually, the way I started making zines was I used to make mixed CDs for people, like really love to make mixed CDs. And
Love it. I mean, I'm old enough. I used to make mixed tapes, cassettes. Yes, and then CDs. Yes, those are the best, right? Something about creating a playlist just isn't, I don't know, it doesn't hit the same.
I mean, it doesn't take the same like effort and thought. I feel like the thought you'd have to be like, okay, and then this song goes after, because there was no shuffle, like that.
Mhm,
I mean,
and
eventually there was, but
there's a limit too on how much time. Like you had to really consider on a playlist, it can be infinite.
exactly. And I used to make people like mix CDs all the time, and I'd make pamphlets to go with them, like little CD books to go with them. And then eventually the CDs were, like you said, we moved to playlists, so we didn't really need CDs anymore. So then I was just making booklets. And then that evolved into zine making. But when I was 19, I was at School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And the way that you get credit there is you like do whatever classes you want. And then you have a show at the end of the semester. It's like a 1-hour critique with professors you've never met. And so I had done this whole thing with mail art. And I think I had mailed out 250 pieces of mail art. And then I made these like memory cubes with scans of like Polaroids I'd taken, all very analogish. And I had 2 professors come in, and they were deciding how much credit to give me for the semester. And I'd been working on these projects the whole semester. And one of them, I'll never forget, came in and he was like, "You're never going to make it as a successful commercial artist." And I was like, okay, that's not really my goal. I mean, I'm 18. What do I know? And then the other artist, incredible Indigenous artist named Bentley Spang. And I'll never forget, Bentley was like, actually, no, this is like a philosophical question of how art functions in society. Let's not tell an 18-year-old that the only reason that art is successful or useful is if it makes money. Look at how much work they've done and how many mediums they've touched and all the themes they're touching on. Witnessing this like philosophical argument between 2 men in their 50s when I was an 18-year-old art today was so interesting. And I think about that a lot. I think of Bentley Spang kind of standing up and being like, absolutely not. In my culture, grandmothers spend months beating outfits for ceremonies. They never get paid. The joy is that they're investing in the future of our culture, of our ceremonies, of their grandchildren, and of the people in our community. And that is the pride and joy of that art making. And that is what it's for. It's for community engagement, it's for community connection. And that's very much what I see this student doing. And I remember thinking, yeah, that is kind of what I'm trying to do. And that does feel really good to be recognized in that way. And it was such a good moment for me to be like, there can be more to life and there can be more to art making and our creative efforts than making money. And look, I understand we can't pay rent in creativity. I get it. But also, I think it's really important for us to have these moments of reclaiming our time and our creativity for us and for our communities.
But how much of our non-paid time do we spend consuming versus creating? And I think that's what you're talking about. So much of what you said there is just so beautiful, and I think important for us to let sit with us. One, that whole it just allows me to remember that all of me exists and has a right to exist, deserves to exist, and to be honored, and I think that's valuable to remember. And then also that part because before you even said it, my brain went to, "But I'm not creative." I mean, it goes there all the time. It keeps saying I'm not creative because why? Not because I'm not creative, but because my creativity either hasn't been deemed by someone else as worthy and or my creativity doesn't get paid, so it doesn't have value. And I think most people can relate to both of those ideas. And that isn't what makes something creative. You're creative because you create. It doesn't matter how quote unquote good or bad it is. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of it. You're creative because you're creating something. The reason most of us aren't creative is because we're not creating, because we're not allowing ourselves, right?
Totally. It's a muscle. And I think making zines and being like, no one needs to hire me or pay me or like publish this, I'm going to do it. I think that builds the muscle so quick and so well because you're just like, this is worthy. Even if it's a zine I just make for myself, those ally zines, we just made them for ourselves to look at and have and show off to each other. But it was like, this is for me. I think shortening the time between like the thought and the action is so important to building the muscle. And it really does say like, oh, I deserve to have this. I deserve to be realized in this area of my life as well. Even if it just means making something for me every once in a while or making something for a friend, like I deserve that. I've had moments where I've made, if it's a friend's like 40th birthday, I'll make a little zine of 40 things I love about them. It's just like, it's a little more than a card, but it also, it's like, it's so special. And yeah, there's something so magical about that, and that's not for sale, that doesn't go to anybody, that's just for them. But I think there's something really special about like having an idea and being like, this idea is worth executing on, and I'm going to do that. I'm not going to prove it to anyone, I'm not going to wait for anyone to buy it, or I'm not going to sell anyone on it. I'm just going to go ahead and make the thing. And zines have such a low barrier of entry that I think it's a beautiful practice of doing that.
Not to shit on Canva, use Canva if that's what gets you into creation mode, but the challenge to say, can I push myself that little bit farther to say, it doesn't have to be perfect and it can still be okay if I make this thing, make it with my hands.
And even if you're making it in Canva, I mean, printing it and folding it, if that's
Yeah.
your first step into making it with your hands, amazing. Seen people make their first zine in Canva in 20 minutes and they're like, that was cool. And then when they print it and fold it, they're like, oh my gosh. And sometimes it takes that moment of like, then they're ready to do the hand draw or do the hand lettering or whatever that is. But I always tell people like, whatever the barrier of entry is that's the lowest for you, start there. But as soon as you can get it into that tangible space so that you can have that moment of excitement.
And not to be ableist either, because there's many reasons why people may not be able to hand do things. So I want
Totally.
to honor that as well. But just that reminder of, yeah, the physical experience of something that we don't get and not needing it to be perfect. We hear all the time about having a somatic experience to deal with our nervous system regulation and things like that in this time. And I think so often we think of that as meditation or maybe going for a walk and whatever. And those are absolutely valid and amazing somatic experiences. But a somatic experience is anything that connects you with your body and reminds you you have a body. And all these things you're talking about, folding a piece of paper, that's a somatic experience.
100%. I mean, and that's why I love it so much because it is so tactile. It is so like there is a feel to the paper. Different papers fold different ways, different inks go onto different papers differently. And there's something so magical about that. And the surprise I often have in my zines is I use that very simple, like one sheet technique. If we can link to it, I can send you a link for people to learn it. And then, but what's so great, and I've never seen other people do this in their zines, once you unfold that, it folds up into a whole piece of paper. And that's like a beautiful opportunity for a moment of surprise. And so it's like, there's something so fun about that. And like, that also feels very somatic to me because it's an embodied moment of surprise. You feel safe. You're holding this piece of paper and then you unravel it or unfold it all the way. And there's like, and there's that little gasp that you do, or like the way that you kind of move your body when you're surprised or delighted. Like it's all very somatic. Makes me think of there's this incredible incredible embroidery artist, Christy Johnson. I adore her work. And I heard her say in an interview once, somebody asked her, like, oh, how are you patient enough to embroider? And I'm paraphrasing here, but she said something like, embroidery teaches me patience. I'm not patient. I need embroidery to have patience. And I think there's something about in our culture, we're so invited to just live in our brain and live in our mind and not in our body. And even technology, when we hold our phones, like we look at it so close, it just, we get so narrow. And if you've studied somatics or trauma or anything like that, a narrow vision fixed on one point for a long period of time is actually really dangerous for us. It makes us feel very unsafe. That's what happens when we're feeling unsafe. If you're running from a tiger, like you are just fixed on the point you're running to. And so it's really important to like get outside the phone, get outside the screen, look around, touch things, be tactile. You get a lot of inspiration from walks, from things like that. So just having those, all that somatic experience kind of like wrapped up into a little zine is so magical. I just was witnessing a friend look at a tarot card and she like went to do the 2-finger spread to zoom in. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a real tarot card. It's like a zoom. Like that's the
Your
size.
phone size. So it does start to, yeah. That's
Yeah,
the
you
problem with
gotta
things
get
with
a
your phone
magnifying
size.
glass or bring it closer or farther from your face. Like you can't zoom on
Yeah.
that. And I think having these, I think we've been so encouraged to live virtually. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's so important to remember, like, oh, I do have a body and I can read things on paper and I want to fold and touch and be in that space. And so it's great. And that's why I tell people go to Zine Fest. You get to touch like 100 zines. It's so magical. So having those experiences where you get to be really tactile, it's really grounding.
I forgot that you had a word that I didn't know, and I'm excited to hear you explain, which is, I'm going to say it wrong, skeuomorphism?
So close. Skeuomorphism.
Skeuomorphism. Tell people what that is and what that has to do with all of the sort of digital experience and whatever.
I learned this word in art school. So skeuomorphism is the idea that we like take things from the physical world into the digital world to understand them. So skeuomorphism is the reason that your trash bucket or trash what is it called? Trash bin on your computer looks like a trash bin. That's why it does, because we understand a trash bin is where things go when we're done with them. So that exists on the computer. Now, eventually with skeuomorphism, what's really interesting is we'll start with things that mimic the physical world. So like on your Kindle, the way the pages used to turn. Then when users get used to the digital world, those things kind of disappear or dissipate. So the original Kindles, they had this beautiful page turn. It was like very illustrative. Now it's not like that. It's like a scroll because
Yeah, I think my iPhone used to have a button I had to push, and now the button is no longer there.
Exactly. So then we train users out of skeuomorphism. But what's so interesting about skeuomorphism is we need help bridging from the physical world to the digital world until we're used to the digital world. And I think I think that just speaks to how embodied we want to be and how it actually, it's so important to remember we are made to live in this realm. And while we can be so digital, we can be so virtual, it's so important to remember to be back in this reality, this physical realm. It just reminds us that, like, while we may now understand things digitally, 20 years when they were starting, we didn't understand them. Technology is something that we're taught. We're not actually innately technological. If you handed someone an iPhone that's never seen an iPhone who's an adult, it's going to take them a long time to figure it out. It's just kind of a box to them.
And it also makes me think, though, of my 9-year-old child who is growing up never knowing a non-digital world in the way that I do. We almost need the opposite of skeuomorphism of how do you help people who've only known a digital world, almost a digital first world, and how do you help them start to translate that into getting off of those devices and having those human experiences again. It almost feels like that's what I want this podcast to be about, is like,
Oh, I love
for
that.
those of us who've gotten too dependent, especially we remember life before, but we can feel it now. You can almost feel this dependency that your life is becoming almost digital first. I'm not trying to say don't be digital because I don't think that's real, but I do think it's like, how do I remember I could be human first and digital second?
Human first. I love that. I was at my mom's house with my niece. She's 9, and we heard the landline ring. My mom sells a landline, and she was like, "What is that sound?" Now her favorite game is home phone because I explained it to her. You have to ask who's calling and ask who they want to talk to, and then you give them the phone. Now it's like her favorite game, so we play home phone every time I see her. But it's so funny. But it's not so much about the individual pieces of technology, but just to remind kids, like, this isn't how it always was, babe.
Your life can look like, I'm encouraging my kid to go explore in this creek in our neighborhood of just like, it can be about exploration. And his first inclination is, no, I want to sit on my device. Every time he goes and he has one of these offline experiences, he comes back better for it. Happy he did it. Lit up in a way he doesn't get lit up about being on a device. He gets numb on a device. When he goes out into life, he gets lit up. And I think it's important for us to remember that as adults too, because it's the same for us. And we get so habitualized into just this is how I go about my day. And we forget we can have these beautiful offline experiences that could transform us. Before we go, what's one offline activity, idea, concept, something that people should try this week?
Ooh, I love this question. I mean, I was inspired by your kiddo going to the creek, and so one thing I love to do is go on a little scavenger hunt when I'm walking around my neighborhood, and then you can always make a zine and put those things that you find in your little scavenger hunt zine.
When you were talking about
Yeah.
what your theme could be, I started thinking, shit I saw on my walk. I was like, I'm gonna
Yes!
open because I that's something I would put in my notes section of my
I love.
phone.
Or I love a color zine, so it's like red things that I love, orange things that I love. Like, I also love when people make zines of things they love so they can remember what they love. Like, what are your favorite podcasts? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite articles?
And maybe the easy thing then is write one list of things.
Write one list of things. Yes, I love that.
That's an easy starting place. So,
Yeah,
all
write
right,
one
thank
list
you.
of things and make a zine by it about it. And you know what? Kids love making zines. Zines are great for kids.
Do it with my kid. That's right. We could dream something up and he loves that kind of stuff. So you've inspired me. I hopefully inspired other people. And then I'm going to share in the show notes information that you're going to give me. I'll also link to the two things I mentioned, the history of zines from Book Riot and the newspaper club. And then also some of the places that you've shared. So people who want to learn about zines, discover zines, maybe create zines can get involved. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, Maz. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I have a little zine coming out people can enjoy where it's like a zine with your astrology and how to be more creative, using your astrology to be more creative. So I'll share that link with you as well so you can share it with your listeners.
Okay. Well, thank you, Maz.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Analogish. This episode is over, but the world is still out there. Go find it.